Kia ora. I'm Julie, and I've got John Sharnock here with me today. John has written a book called A Sense of Reason. Now, John, in your book, A Sense of Reason, you labelled forced association within our psychiatric and prison institutions and treatment institutions as an error of magnitude. Yet from time to time we hear politicians telling us our approach to prisons treatment is scientifically based.
Sadly, Julie, we breached scientific law when we failed to test an institutional design that didn't force inmate or patient to associate. Why the politician keeps claiming scientific validation defies logic and reality.
The breach of scientific law sounds alarming. Can you give me some specific examples of the errors with the forced association?
Okay, take for instance forced association's demand for the instinctive response of inmate or patient to refine and rationalise and reinforce one another's distortions and denials. Immature minds at best, in the lonely and threatening environment, instinctively attempting to make friends. The danger of this circumstance best exampled in the Norris and Batek fiasco. Two individuals who in the early 70s raped and sadistically tortured several young women before killing them. Ultimately, it was evidenced in court that Norris and Batek met each other in prison, became friends in prison, and planned their future crimes in prison. Bonding out of fear, loneliness or weakness, a routine response from immature or ill minds, and all offering consequences that fail society totally.
Yeah, and in your book, you also spoke of a case with Bernard Deer.
Yes, Bernard Deer walked out of an American psychiatric apartment block and stabbed a baby in a stroller. When tackled to the ground and asked why he did this, he stated that his roommates, Oasi and Billy, had been winding him up that badly that he felt he had to kill something. Yet again, forced association of dysfunctional minds reveals a totally counterproductive response.
And in your book, you spoke of other systematic faults, such as police standing over young offenders while in police custody, to walk them into a state of fear, to hear their previous criminal record read.
Yes, this has been a systematic nonsense for over 100 years. 2 or 3 officers scaring young offenders or the mentally ill by crowding around them and nose-to-nose screaming that they have to walk out onto the stage or bad things are going to happen. The majority walk onto the floodlit stage, and while their previous criminal record is read out, officers seated in a darkened area of the room yell things like wanker, fuckwit or moron. Yet this serves only to challenge or humiliate young offenders, and I'm sure it doesn't assist the mentally ill to find a more mature focus. The routine response from young offenders back within the general holding cell is now a mutual sharing of their indignation for this police act, and this serves to bond young offenders, helping them to establish new friendships in the new and scary police world.
Youth in general and youth offenders are particularly so dependent upon the opinion of the other youth's opinion or acceptance.
Without doubt, Julie, but it is this way across the containment setting. Much older inmates and patients still locked in the variety of peer pressure influences. In Peremuremu Prison's D block, officers noted there was a noticeable deterioration in the attitudes and behaviour of the males who remained in D block. This was attributed in large part to the return of a particularly volatile inmate from Oakley Hospital. His unsettling influence was immediately apparent. One person's ability to distract or influence a majority. It's an absolute failing of forced association. No one is seriously considering growing up. Now they are emotively occupied and led astray by a stronger personality.
And John, you're also critical of the office treatment scenario between a psychiatrist and their patient, for instance.
Relying solely on the office treatment scenario defies belief, Julie. There are simply too many failures. In the far from natural or imaginative setting of the office, with patients seated before a desk staring at the face of a stranger, many seem unable to find the focus to relax or communicate themselves honestly and instinctively present a mask of deception. In Jason McCrell's office treatment, he was noted to be quiet, controlled, talked in a soft voice, and his speech was normal in both volume and the ideas he produced. Jason denied any problems, but the psychiatrist noted some inappropriate giggling. I would have thought the giggling would have given the game away. Jason would go on to kill an elderly woman after release. His office-inspired mask of appeasement had worked, and one can only wonder when the psychiatrist advised Jason to minimise his drug intake, calling this motivational enhancement technique, how long these words stayed in the mind as Jason returned to the other patients who he was selling drugs to. And William Cameron fared no better. In a psychiatrist's office presenting for an emergency assessment for suicidal thought, he was sent on his way after only half the time needed for an emergency assessment, with an appointment to return in 5 weeks' time. He awoke the next morning and killed his wife.
Which brings us to your idea, the individual hut, individually fenced. Why do you think this is the best alternative to treatment?
The individual hut design firstly seeks to take full advantage of the striking of the senses and the breakdown of the orienting structures associated with human response to the act of imprisonment or turning of the key upon the human being. We have an individual's attention, only now they aren't distracted by other inmates or patients. They are now physically able to solely focus upon visits in their hut area by relevant professionals, something basic psychiatric data would support when dealing with, for instance, schizophrenic symptoms. And I quote, "Distractions that intrude into the focal zone of awareness sabotage the effort demanded to construct a sentence. The hut design recognises that the demand for repetitive distraction features across all containment levels and is more than capable of harming and misdirecting the diagnosed and yet to be diagnosed schizophrenic individuals already struggling to find a realistic level of competence." Hut design also offers for inmates or patients to cook their own meals, a very real-life coping skill linked to more successful rehabilitation results. They can also leave their hut and sit on the grass surrounding the hut. In this more natural setting, professional counsellors can come and speak with the individuals. Hut design openly challenges the accepted nonsense of Jason McCrell's inability to accept or respond to present-day psychiatric hospital treatment. Admitting himself on an informal basis to Sunnyside Hospital for a lithium overdose, he then experienced a sudden onset of aggression and agitation, voicing of paranoid thoughts, and demanded to leave the hospital. The sense of insecurity Jason experienced could have easily been prompted by the stranger mindsets or depressingly lacklustre hospital setting that he was forced to acknowledge. Just as Ian Hope's admission to Sunnyside Hospital was followed by yet again the relatively sudden onset of a mixed manic and psychotic episode, which would ultimately see him go on to a weekend leave, kill his 8-year-old daughter, then commits suicide upon his return to the hospital. Or psychiatric patient Aaron Halliday stabbing himself after being stood over by other patients for his cigarettes and money. Hardly seems a therapeutic environment. For these people seeking help, the potential to take a wrong turn in the forced association setting was an absolute reality, a cold, hard fact.
So you're saying the very environment created by forced association obviously holds the ability to misdirect or negatively influence those in its care.
Without doubt, Julie.
Which certainly aligns with accepted factual data, such as the Deborah Wilson quote, from Genetics, Crime and Justice, who clearly stated pre-existing genetic tendencies are either activated or exacerbated by environmental factors.
Yes, essentially we have been playing Russian roulette with weaker or damaged minds, hoping they don't meet some other patient or inmate who negatively influences them, hoping the unnatural prison or hospital setting doesn't overly depress them. This approach has failed spectacularly. The individual hut design offers a more balanced, natural and accessible sense of security and can be realistically policed. I would build and test the individual hut design, as the nonsense we currently call treatment has inflicted more than enough damage upon individuals seeking help.
Thank you, John. That was really interesting to hear that. And your recommendation of the individual hut with therapeutic input sounds valuable.